What is up, guys? I am Howie and this is the Go Ride channel. Today's video is a how-to on adjusting the valves on a CRF230F. Now, if you've never adjusted valves before, this bike is probably the easiest to do because it's not a shim style adjustment. So you don't have to check, change shims, recheck in order to set the valve lash. It's just got a lock nut and an adjuster that allows you to set the lash that way. So it's significantly easier than doing something like a DRZ 400 or that Ducati over there or something to that effect. So I am going to, rather than try to do it now, I'm going to come back later and do a clip of every tool that I reach for so I can tell you what you need. So roll the post clip now. All right, guys, this is the post-production list of all the tools you're going to need. I used a torque wrench, small extension, a 1/4-inch drive ratchet and extension to take the plastics off, a corresponding 1/4-inch drive socket set, specifically to remove the fuel tank, and most of the plastics I use 8 and 10 millimeter sockets. You'll need a 12 millimeter wrench and a 12 millimeter socket to remove the upper engine plate. I use an 18 millimeter socket, deep socket, to pull my spark plug. You'll need a 14 millimeter socket to rotate the crank. You'll need the ratchet handle. I used a 6 mil Allen socket to remove the timing cover. And I actually ended up using a 3/8 Allen to remove the crank cover, which is probably not right. I have a feeling it's just because my bike is hurt, and it's probably actually a 10 mil. Go figure. Now for the really specialty tools. You're going to need feeler gauges, either a book style, but I think that for doing this, these are actually much, much easier. These specific ones, I believe, are Motion Pros, which if I can find these, I'll link that in the description. And then this is part of a set of 3, but a Motion Pro valve adjustment wrench. And what this does is this allows you to loosen the lock nut and then independently adjust the adjuster, and it's indexed to, I think, like the 32nd of a turn. This comes in a set of 3. This is absolutely, you can do it without it, but this makes it so much easier. Totally recommend it. Otherwise, you would need a small square bit and a 10 millimeter socket, but totally recommend that. I'm going to link that in the description too. Also, one of the things I ended up using was a zip tie or a piece of wire and pliers to cut it on and off, because I'll end up zip tying my ratchet to the foot peg just to hold the motor at TDC. So let's get back to it. Now that we've got that out of the way, I've got most of the plastics off of the bike from the resurrection video of the carb rebuild, but I still need to remove the fuel tank. So I'm going to go ahead and get to that. From there, I'll get into some of the other steps that are involved. Make sure you turn the fuel off before you go to remove the fuel line. Remove the fuel tank. Now that the fuel tank is off, I'm actually going to go ahead and remove the spark plug. And what that's going to do is that's going to give compression a place to go when I put the motor at TDC in order to do the valve adjustment. If I don't remove the spark plug, I'll have pressure in the cylinder trying to push the piston either over TDC or back behind it, which I don't want. I want it to just stay lined up for the duration of the adjustment. The next step, I think we're on, say, step number 3, is going to be to remove the upper hanger mount for the motor. So to do that, you have to remove these rubber caps, set them aside, remove the 3 bolts in order to get to the valve inspection port. At this point, I'm going to remove the timing cover and the crankshaft it's going to access or positioning nut cover. That's on the other side of the bike. This is the timing mark cover right here, and that's the crankshaft nut cover, so I'm going to go ahead and pull those off. So very quickly, by turning this nut, I'll be able to turn the engine over. Obviously, you want to have the bike in neutral to do that. And then I'll be able to see the position of the engine through this top inspection port right here. So I'll show you, I'm going to go ahead and line it up, and then I'll show you what that looks like. So God, I hope you can see this, but there's two indexing marks, one on the case, or side case, and one down there on, I'm not sure what that is, maybe a flywheel or a counterweight. Line those up, there's a T next to it. That indicates that the engine is at top dead center. So that means both valves should be completely closed, and the cams should be at, an all the way closed position. So I'll be adjusting the valves when they're completely closed like you're supposed to. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and remove these two inspection covers, and that'll give me access to the valve adjustment. Here's a pro tip on using an adjustable wrench. So this jaw here should always face the direction of rotation. So if I'm going to be tightening a nut, which to you is going to look like turning it to the left, but if I'm going to tighten a nut this way, I want to hold the wrench this way so that way most of the force is in here and not on this jaw. Conversely, if I'm loosening something, I want the jaw up here. And that just helps this jaw keep from moving. You're going to get a better result. Not the end of the world, but the proper use of a crescent wrench. So in there you can see your intake valve. And on that side, you can see the exhaust valve. So at this point, we want to make sure that the engine is indexed correctly. In a 4-stroke engine, the piston is at top dead center twice in an engine cycle, right? Or, it's a 4-stroke engine, so it'll come up to the top to compress, come down, bang, come back up to exhaust the spent air fuel mixture. On this bike, you need to do the adjustment when you're at the compression cycle. So one way to do this is to leave the plug in and feel which is tighter, right? Because you'll feel less resistance on the exhaust stroke. Or you could check to feel that there's play up and down in the exhaust valve. In this case, I'm not feeling any play, so I'm going to go ahead and rotate the engine again, line up the timing marks, and check to see if there's play in the valve. So at this point, I can feel play back and forth, a very slight amount of play in either valve. So the bike's still trying to roll off a TDC, so I'm going to go ahead and use a couple of zip ties to the foot peg just to hold my ratchet in place. So at this point, we can check the valve lash. So I'm going to go ahead and grab feeler gauges. For this bike, the correct amount of clearance is 4/1000ths of an inch, so 4 mil. And that's good for both the intake and the exhaust side. So to check the actual clearance, I have these feeler gauges. These are a lot easier than if you have like a book of the flat style, because these kind of allow you to angle your way into the valve. So at this point, I'm actually going to check the clearance on the valves. So I'm going to start with 2 mil, 3 mil, and then go to 4 mil. 2 and 3 should fit easily. 4 mil should have slight resistance, and a 5 mil should not fit. Let's see what we've got. Checking the intake side first. I want to give you a quick close-up view, and I'm going to do the best I can with a flashlight to show you exactly where the gap is that you're trying to feel. So this is what we're working on, and I apologize, my hands aren't the steadiest. Just be happy I'm not your dentist. So you've got a rocker arm in there, and then you've got the valve right on top of the valve spring. And you can see that there's like a little post that comes out of that, that adjustment and pushes down on the valve. That is the gap that you're actually looking to feel with the feeler gauge. So easily able to fit the 2 mil, easily able to fit the 3 mil, I feel slight resistance on the 4 mil, but it does go in. And I can kind of fit the 5 mil in. So I'm maybe a hair loose. So I'm gonna go ahead, for the sake of the video, ordinarily I probably wouldn't do an adjustment at this point, because if they're a little bit loose, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's if they're too tight, that's when you start to have like real long-term wear problems. And this is marginal, but for the sake of the video, I'm gonna go ahead and do it. So if I remember correctly, the Honda adjustment, this wrench is from Motion Pro, and these things are awesome. This outer lever allows you to loosen the lock nut, and this inner allows you to actually adjust the lash. So I'm going to go ahead and, if I remember correctly, it's a 10 millimeter outer with the small square inner, and I believe these things are sold in a set of 3. If I can find it, I'll link it in the description. So I went ahead and loosened the lock nut. Because my valve was a little bit on the loose side, I'm going to want to turn my adjuster clockwise. There are notches on this handle and an indexing mark on the outer handle. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn very, very slightly, like very slightly to the right, retighten, and then recheck with 3 mil, 4 mil, and 5 mil feeler gauges. 3 mil still fits easily. Oops. See, I think I may have gone a little too far. So I just went counterclockwise just a little bit, and now I'll recheck clearance. 3 mil fits easily. 4 mil fits with slight resistance. And I can't really get the 5 mil in there. So I feel good that that's properly adjusted. I'm going to go ahead and move over to the exhaust side, repeat the process, and then I'll go ahead and go through the reassembly. Exhaust side was fine. Let's go ahead and get this bolted back up. At this stage of the game, I can go ahead and reassemble everything. If you want to get really fancy, these O-rings right here, you should put just a little bit of a film of oil on them. Just clean motor oil to help them seal. When you're doing this, it's good to have a relatively clean bike because you are messing with oil passages, right? This is in the head. This is a lubricated area of the bike. So if you spill a bunch of dirt in here, it's going to get into your engine. So it might be helpful if you have it clean. Now that these are just in hand tight, you can go ahead and torque them. Torque spec is 15 Newton meters, which is less than 10 pound-feet. Not very tight at all. And this back one, I can't really get a wrench in there. So if you just kind of make them snug but not tight, you'll be okay. Likewise on the timing window and crank window, your timing window is 6 Newton meters, which is very little, and the crank is 8, also very little, so I'm just going to go ahead and make those, again, snug but not tight. These have O-rings as well, which I'm going to lubricate with engine oil. Next, we can reinstall the upper hanger. These bolts are a little bit tighter. They go to 34 Newton meters. These things are labeled with an inside and an outside, so be sure to be mindful of that when you go ahead and put them on. The plates, I mean. Next, reinstall the rubber caps, the spark plug, and the fuel tank. Sorry, my butt's in the way. At this point, with everything back together and the fuel tank back on, I can go ahead and test fire the bike. Bear in mind that I still haven't actually tuned the carburetor, so it may be a little messy. On half choke. So I'm not hearing anything out of the ordinary with the bike, except for the fact that the airbox cover is in fact off, so it's a little lean right now, and like I said, I haven't tuned anything. But that's about it, guys. With that, get out there, go do your valves, go ride. You do